Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. This episode is brought to you by CampingSurvival.com. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including bug-out bags, long-term storage food, water filters, gas masks, and first aid kits. Check them out online today at CampingSurvival.com. Be sure to enter coupon code PrepperRecon for a 5% discount on your entire order. Today's guest is Glen Tate, the author of the 299 Days book series. Glen was on the show before, and we had a great interview. Glen, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was a great interview. I put it up on my website as I denoted it as a really good interview. So, that's for real. So I appreciate it. It was great questions, good topics, and so I'm very happy to be back.
Oh, absolutely. It's always our pleasure to have you on. So what have you been doing with yourself since the last time we had you on?
Well, let's see. Book 6 came out at the beginning of June, and there's been a lot of hoopla about that. We set some records, our own kind of internal records. The amount of Facebook people we reached and the likes have just gone up. We had a tenfold increase in the number of people we were reaching on Facebook, which is phenomenal. And get this, I never thought I'd say this. This is one of the many sentences I never thought I would utter, but because of this book now, I'm saying and doing things that I never thought I'd do. For at least a week, I haven't checked if it's still true, for at least a week, I was beating Tom Clancy on Amazon under war fiction, which totally blows me away. His whatever latest book, I don't even know what it is. I don't even know if he's still writing them. They could be ghostwriters. I'm not claiming Tom Clancy at his prime. I was in that category, but yes, we were actually ahead of him on the sales rankings, and that was amazing. So there's been that stuff, and then I've been doing a lot of summertime stuff. I staged my deck, which sounds like it has nothing to do with Prepper Recon, but it actually does, and that's because there's a great analogy here. And when I was planning on when I was planning on staging my deck, in my mind's eye, I see a picture of me kind of with that, it's like a mop thing that you use, to like stain a deck or paint or something, it's like a paint thing, and I kind of saw myself doing that. I thought, okay, that's what staining the deck is all about. Well, then I actually did it, and it's actually all related to prepping, believe it or not. I actually went and stained the deck. It took about 8 hours, and I spent about 45 minutes actually staining the deck, actually using that kind of mop thing that I had in my mind's eye. I spent a ton of time buying paint, buying some brushes. I had to clean off the deck. I had to prep it with some stuff to remove the mildew. I had to paint the spindles with a little hand brush. I had to move all the stuff off the deck. And so when you added it all up, what I thought I was going to do was a very small portion of what I actually ended up doing. And I think there's an analogy there to prepping. We all think, okay, when there's a collapse, we're going to be having firefights with zombies and all this other stuff. And we're probably not. We're probably going to be doing a ton of boring stuff, things that we kind of knew we had to do, but didn't appreciate how much time it would take. Maybe that's getting water, maybe that's getting food, maybe that's really boring guard duty. But I thought it was a really interesting analogy because so often we think something is going to turn out a particular way that's kind of the image we have in our mind, and it turns out to not really be that way. But it is still what we had in mind. It's just that there was a lot of other stuff other than what we thought it would be. So anyway, yeah, staying in the deck and putting out book 6. That's been it. I continue to work a lot in my day job, and that's going well, and all that kind of stuff. I've been keeping an eye on the economy because I think things are at a really, really interesting time. I think things are heating up, so that's what I've been up to.
Cool. And you mentioned book 6 is out. It's the 17th Irregulars. Can you give us a little sneak peek of what's going on here in book 6?
Yeah, book six is the one where the 17th Irregulars form up, and the 17th Irregulars, as the name implies, an irregular force, is a guerrilla unit. The good guys have put together guerrilla units, and one of them forms up at Pierce Point, which is the location where the most of the book takes place. It's a statewide organization of patriots, and they have a big meeting with representatives from each unit, and they count off 1 through 23. And Grant Matson, was in line, and he called out number 17. So, well, now he's a lieutenant for the 17th Irregulars. That's how that came about. And the irregular forces are, as I mentioned, guerrillas. Most of them are led by some FUSA, former United States of America, special forces soldiers who are trained to just take a few of them and then gather up a bunch of local people and train and lead the local people to go do irregular warfare. So it's about how the unit comes together and some of the decisions that need to be made, some of the difficult choices, because this is not easy to do. And I don't mean that in the practical sense. I mean, there's a lot of that. But, I mean, a lot of the characters, the main character in particular, Grant Matson, has a really hard time accepting all this. It's one thing to think in the abstract, much like stating the deck, right? It's easy to think in the abstract, well, there could be a conflict, and there might be some irregular warfare, and, me or people I know might end up in guerrilla units. It's one thing to have that thought, but when the main character has to sit down and really think about it and apply it and live it, it's a lot harder to do. He has to lie to his wife, who doesn't know about any of this. He has to lie to all of his friends and neighbors except the team and a handful of other people out at Pierce Point. And because he has to keep it secret, because you can't, announce that there's a special forces unit that is formed up as a regular guerrilla unit at a particular place. Why don't you just give him the latitude and longitude while you're at it, And so he has to keep it from people, and he has to decide, okay, I'm a patriot and all that, but am I really going to do this? Because this is obviously treason to the former government, and that carries a pretty high price. And there's a little bit of a glimpse into the founding fathers and what they must have been going through. There's a reference to lives, fortune, and sacred honor, which is what they pledged. And it wasn't just some words that ended up in a history book. They were literally their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors. Many families were broken apart. Many people were killed and injured, and family members were tortured by the British. I mean, there's a high price to pay. So it looks at that because, as you know from the other books in this series, this is not some rah-rah comic book. Wouldn't it be great to take on the United States government? Because you know what? It would not at all be good. I mean, the situation would be horrible. There'd be tons of killing and starvation and disease and terrible, terrible things. So this isn't fun and games. This is not a video game. And so a lot of those thoughts are played out there. And then you get to see how this unit forms up. I'm lucky to have some amazing friends in the special operations community. I, of course, am not former military, law enforcement. I am a regular white-collar civilian guy. I have no military talent whatsoever. I'd just like to be clear about that so nobody thinks I'm, a wannabe or something. But I have friends in the business, and one of them in particular helps me a great deal with the technical side of this in describing exactly how a guerrilla unit would form up, how it would be organized, but it's not sort of a field manual thing. It's all described in a story format through characters, so you get to see what is involved with it, and I think that's pretty fascinating. And of course, many of the other characters that are not out at Pierce Point, that are still back in the Olympia and Seattle areas, that are held by the Loyalists. Those areas are held by the Loyalists. We hear from them, and we see that the conditions are worsening, in the occupied, I will call it, the loyalist areas, and the loyalists are continuing to lose their grip on power, and that, I think, is interesting. It's all building up to, book 7, 8, 9, and then, of course, 10. So, yeah, that's a preview of what happens in book 6. I have to tell you the name, 17th Irregulars, and the cover, which has the patch of the 17th Irregulars. That patch has taken off wildly. There's a prepper friend of mine who does the merchandising stuff, and he is selling. I mean, we kind of melted down his server actually, which makes me very happy. And I'm getting picture after picture of people who have purchased the patch, and then they're sending in pictures of it in various settings, and not just military and quasi-military settings, but other ones too. And so this patch has become, I think, a symbol for people. I got to see it. This is a funny story. I got to see the patch for the first time. I didn't even get them yet because, the merchandise guy makes sure that orders are fulfilled before he gives me any, which is fair. I mean, I want that to happen. So I was with a friend of mine who's a retired Special Forces guy, to be specific, and he pulled out his kit and body armor, and there it was. The 17th Irregulars patch was on his thing, and I thought that was really cool. It was a great way to see it for the first time. So anyway, that's what's going on with the 17th Irregulars, which is book 6.
Oh, that's very, very cool. And you said you'd been paying attention to the economy. Now, last week, Obama said he listened to business owners who recommend that he postpone the mandate for businesses to provide health care. The employer mandate originally would have required business owners with 50 or more full-time employees to provide health care insurance for those employees. It was set to kick in at the end of the year, but it's now been pushed back to 2015. Do you really think the business community asked him to push it back to 2015, or is he lying again? Maybe they really asked him to throw out the mandate altogether.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot believe, number one, that he listened to the business community. If he listened to the business community, he would have vetoed this ridiculous law in the first place. And it's important to note, and this is something I get to work with in my day job, the business community is not nearly as united as people think. There's, of course, big business, and there's small business, and then there are all kinds of factions and splinters within that. There's some actually liberal small business groups and some conservative big business groups. Most big business groups are very practical and moderate, which is to say they're squishes and they do whatever, is good for their profit. They try to use laws to make it hard on their competitors, and they try to use laws to get government contracts that other people can't. So, but anyway, I cannot conceive of the president listening to the business community. It's an obnoxious lie. He came out with another obnoxious lie that seems a little harmless and it's kind of humorous, but it really illustrates, I think, the fact that the guy is a politician and will say anything. He was asked at some group of, some kids or whatever at a school what his favorite food was, and he said broccoli. Come on, nobody's favorite food is broccoli. And it was obviously, I don't know, it's cute and harmless, and they're kids and everything, and we can all chuckle, oh, he said broccoli. But the idea that he listened to business and moved back this mandate is like him saying broccoli is his favorite food. I mean, it's absurd to believe it's true. And, this is weird. I don't know all the details. In fact, as Nancy Pelosi said, you have to pass the bill to know what's inside the bill. So nobody really knows what the Health Care Act entails, and I'm certainly not one of them. But I understand secondhand that the thing that's been moved back is the requirement that employers, over 50 employers, so we're going to start hearing about the 49ers and not the football team, the many, many companies that are going to only have 49 employees, right?
That's
but anyway,
right.
Employers over 50 in number, or pardon me, people with 50 or more employees, would have had to, by January 1st, 2014, but now it's 2015, they would have to have health insurance acceptable to the federal government, or they would have to put their people on Obamacare and pay a tax. Well, now that requirement to either have government acceptable health care or put people on Obamacare is what's been moved back. But, there are tons and tons of other parts of Obamacare that still kick in on January 1st, 2014. And there's so many of them, it would take hours and hours to list them off, and I don't know what they all are either. But it's not as if Obamacare will not be implemented for another year. It's just one of the more obnoxious, costly parts of it. I have no idea if this is true, but I'll just speculate. They've got to be, the administration, have got to be running into extreme difficulty trying to implement this, and not just political difficulty. I mean administrative and practical and economic difficulty. And this is, I think, a way out for them to get some more time. I mean, it's such a gigantic undertaking. I've heard a sixth of the U.S. economy. I've heard a seventh of the U.S. economy. It's an enormous chunk. I mean, the U.S. healthcare market is way more than the gross domestic product of virtually any other country. I mean, it's that big. And for them to think that they can micromanage it the way they're going to be doing it, was hubris, to say the least, that they could even pull this off. And so they're running into all kinds of problems. You know, one of the interesting problems from a political standpoint is that quite a few states are refusing, at least they seem to be refusing, to institute these healthcare exchanges, which are basically the frameworks for having the government health insurance work in their states. And some of them are even risking Medicaid money, possibly Medicare money, but I know Medicaid money. So that's a monkey wrench that's been thrown into this whole process. So it's going to be a colossal failure, and I do know, the political side of me notes that having terribly unpopular things happen on January 1st, 2015 means they happen about 8 weeks after the congressional elections in November 2014. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. I'm sure that has nothing to do with it, but
no, they would never plan something like that so that you have 2 years before the next presidential election to absorb the pain.
Yeah, and then they can say, well, look, it's not nearly as bad. All these people back in November 2014 predicted this would be bad, and it wasn't nearly as bad, and they completely cooked the statistics, like, the ridiculous fake inflation numbers and fake GDP numbers that always get revised and seem to be far, far worse than they announced. And then they announced, GDP figures. Oh, the economy grew by 0.1%, and then CNBC goes nuts, and everybody buys stock, and everybody feels good about it. And then months later, or sometimes, like a year or more later, those numbers get revised, and we find out that, it wasn't 0.1% GDP growth. It was, 0.5% decline in GDP. But that's old news, and nobody remembers it, but everybody went out and, based on what Squawk Box says, went out and bought a bunch of stocks based on fake numbers. But I don't mean to digress about fake numbers. But, of course, in the 2 years that they would have from 2014 elections to the 2016 elections, they could convince the many, many idiots out there in the general population that everything's peachy keen. So, yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I was surprised, though, when it happened, because I really thought that it was sort of a damn the torpedoes approach that the administration was taking. We don't care how difficult this is going to be and how much we're going to wreck the economy. We're going to do this anyway because we are socialists, and wrecking this country is actually what we have in mind. So let's get it going sooner rather than later. But, that's great. So I don't think it'll have a big impact on people. They're still going to see premiums go through the roof and all those other things that are going on. Interesting, but there's no way he considered business when it came to that.
No, and then, like you said, the individual mandate still stands, and that's still going to be required of everybody on January 1st. So gold and silver have continued to get slaughtered over the past few weeks. The gold to oil ratio is 11-1 if you use the Brent crude price, which many claim is the global standard oil price. Historically, anytime the gold to oil price ratio got to 20-1, it was a good time to sell. On the other hand, anytime the gold to oil price ratio got near 10-1, it was a screaming buy signal for gold. 11-1 is pretty close to 10-1. What are your thoughts on gold?
Well, yeah, I think, people should own as much gold and silver as they possibly can. Full disclosure, I do not own any gold and silver. I've been investing in ammunition, and working on my cabin and some of those sorts of things. So I'm not going to say buy gold and silver and then I don't do it myself. Of course, I'm not a financial advisor. There's all those disclaimers there. But anyway, I think it's a fantastic deal. But it's interesting to me, the spot price can be whatever, I don't know, J.P. Morgan wants it to be. But that's really not the price people are paying. I mean, I guess I don't know the details of the commodities market for paper gold because I pay no attention to paper gold because I think it's just a terrible idea. But you can have a spot price of, I don't know, $1,300 an ounce for gold. And that's all fine and good, but good luck trying to find any gold bullion right now. As you probably know, the U.S. Mint pretty much quit producing it, and they've said it'll be months and months before there'll be any more. They're not the only source of it by any means. It's extremely hard to actually find physical gold. And the premiums, that's the extra amount, over the spot price that you have to pay for regular bullion, just rounds, which are not coins. It's just sort of gold. And then, of course, the coins, they have collector's value, so there's always more of a premium for them. But the premiums on all these things are way, way, way higher than the spot price. And so I view the spot price, and that's the price of gold you hear every day when they say, today gold was up $4 to whatever it is. I think that's completely artificial because it only applies, from what I can tell, to paper gold traders. And a piece of paper or some zeros and ones on a computer screen, mean nothing to me. And when the collapse hits, it's going to be a big, scary, bad joke for a lot of people. I think that, they're going to say, well, I have this piece of paper that says I have X amount of ounces of gold, and then nobody's going to return that call. So there's no reason why gold should be, quote, on sale like it is right now and be at such low prices. There's huge demand for it. China is buying just an amazing quantity of gold. India is buying a ton of gold. Obviously, Americans, go ahead, as I say, and call up a gold dealer, and most of them probably won't be honest with you, but, some of them will, if they're honest, tell you that it'll be weeks or months before you're actually going to get the gold because they just can't get any. So you've got this amazing demand for it throughout the world, and yet the price is low. And the only explanation I can come up with is an incomplete one and an obvious one, and that is that the spot price of gold on paper is being manipulated. I don't know how. I'm not smart enough to know how. I just know that, these gigantic financial entities can and do manipulate these sorts of things. I would presume, again, complete speculation, because it's not like, J.P. Morgan asks me into the boardroom and tells me what's going on and gives me the secret memo, the Goldman Sachs secret memo. They're not coming to my inbox. But I would presume that they're manipulating the price downward so they can buy a bunch of it at low prices. By the way, I don't know anyone that's selling gold. Anyway, so they could, get gold at a cheaper price because they know it's going to go way up. And so while I don't know why it's being manipulated or how it's being manipulated, the only explanation I can come up with is that these gold and silver prices, again, on paper, are artificially low. But the proof is in the pudding when it comes to actually getting physical gold. And, of course, the other component of the ratio you described is the price of oil, which is, another thing I don't have any details about. I know that, of course, oil that's denominated in U.S. dollars, you're going to see it go up when the value of the U.S. dollar goes down. I don't know how much of the price increase in oil has to do with the devaluation of the U.S. dollar. I imagine it has something to do with it. It has something to do with world events. I mean, we have another apparent coup, civil war, unrest, whatever it is, in Egypt. I would get all the gold and silver you possibly could, and I'm not doing it myself, so I'm a hypocrite, I guess.
Well, no, because you did. You mentioned your favorite precious metal right at the beginning of that. You said it's copper jacketed lead. I think the scientific name for that alloy is Glen Tatium. We're starting to see ammunition inventories normalized for the first time since the Sandy Hook tragedy. 30-round Magpul PMags are back to $15 a pop instead of $60. Should we back up the truck right now or wait till there's another scare?
Oh, I think that people should get as much ammunition and magazines and firearms and training. Obviously, that's a key component. There's never a run on that, by the way. But they should get all that stuff that they possibly can. Don't lose your head and go put a bunch of stuff on credit cards that you can't afford. I mean, it should be a very high priority is what my point. My two rules of prepping are don't go into debt and don't break the law. And those are two good rules for just about any activity in life. But anyway, so yeah, I think people should get all they can. I think now that PMags are available, it would be a really good time to get some. Ammunition is starting to become available, which is kind of an interesting segue into a topic I never thought I would talk about. Remember, like that sentence that I never thought I'd say about beating Tom Clancy on Amazon? Well, here's another sentence I never thought I'd say. I have sponsors now, and one of my sponsors is an ammunition sponsor, AmmunitionDepot.com, and it's an online amazing selection of bulk ammunition, and I was blown away at all the stuff they have, which to me is proof that the ammunition market is stabilizing and normalizing. You can get cases of 5.56. That's of course 1,000 rounds, and all those sorts of things, and it comes right to your door. No more, going to Walmart 3 times a day trying to figure out when the truck's coming, to get a box of 50 rounds or something like that. So that's good to see. But so yes, as the ammunition sponsor, I mean, what a country. You can write a book and some people like it, and then people want to sponsor you. I mean, ammunition companies want to sponsor you, so that's terrific. And there's been some training sponsors, too. There's Tactical Response, Holster Company, Concealment Solutions, Sling Company, SKT Industries, and let's see, another training class, Mag 40, and SOE Tactical with some gear stuff. All these folks, and these are mostly people that I've known in the past, and I've bought their stuff and love their stuff. And now that people are listening to what I have to say, they want me to talk about their stuff, and I'm happy to do it because I've used it and long before I wrote the book. So anyway, enough about the sponsor thing. But you mentioned the ammunition market, and I couldn't help but mention Ammunition Depot. So there you go. Very good. And now last month, the Fed said they're considering tapering QE. The original target date to begin slowing the printing presses was 2015. That's been rolled back to 2014. Do you think they're getting scared that inflation could get out of control? Maybe somebody sent Ben Bernanke a copy of the 299 Days series. I would love that. Well, this is one of those yes but yes kind of answers. Yes, they are afraid of inflation. They have to be. I mean, I went and bought some steaks the other day to do a little cookout for the team, because the team are real guys. They're not just made up people in the book. And I hadn't bought steaks in quite a while, I guess. Price of beef is double what I remember it being. Obviously, gasoline. We all know all these real prices that are going up. Of course, the consumer price index conveniently excludes food and energy because, of course, who really needs food and energy? I mean, we should really look at how much an iPad costs, I guess. That's really
that's what's important. That's what we need. We need the iPads. We don't really need food and gasoline. We can get by without that stuff as long as I got my Mac.
Exactly. So, in energy prices, too, I guess utilities in general, because it's not like electricity and gas and diesel are things that are necessary for everything we consume. But anyway, the CPI numbers are a complete joke. It was funny. I was in the grocery store, and a guy ahead of me, who's a friend of mine, he's not really a prep or anything. He's kind of a regular guy, and he's a smart guy, but he's not a terribly political guy. I forget how the topic came up. I didn't bring it up, but he brought up inflation, and ironically, he was buying some gas, a gas card, and some milk. And he said to me, I wish I can remember the context, but basically, inflation's not that bad. And I said, really? That's funny because look at the two things you're buying, gas and food. Those are two things that are excluded from that number you just quoted to me. So, yeah, I guess the number you quoted to me is looking pretty good, but does milk and gas cost more than it did last year? But anyway, so we all know that there's real inflation, and we all know that, it's just bubbling. I mean, it's the pressure to have real inflation. I mean, snap of a finger, big time inflation, even more than we have now is out there. So yes, they're afraid of it, but I don't think they can possibly stop the tapering because, as you know, if they stop the tapering, a couple things happen. First of all, the stock market is going to lose a lot of money, and that's another fake entity and fake measurement. Of course, the 30 Dow Industrials that they now have on there aren't the ones they had in the past, so they can say that the stock price, collectively the Dow is higher or where it was a while ago, and it's a completely different measurement of the stocks of different companies, which is, just a complete joke. It's so sad when people tell me, yeah, but the stock market's doing okay, and that's supposed to, end the argument, they have all the economic facts, and, the stock market's up, so whatever. But anyway, so the stock market goes way down because we've seen that even when there's hints, there were a couple weeks ago that maybe QE3 would be tapered a little bit. Stock market went down 600 points in 2 days or something, and so that's a problem for them. But obviously, the bigger problem for them if they stop the tapering is that interest rates start to go up. We're already seeing it in mortgage rates, which is what everybody seems to care about, and that makes sense because that affects people. But 10-year Treasury notes. These are going to be rough numbers, so forgive me if I'm wrong. I want to say about 1.6, 1.7% for a 10-year Treasury note a couple weeks ago, and now I want to say 2.6 or 2.7%, which is a huge increase in just a few weeks. And that's a big deal because, as you know, the government borrows so much money, they roll over the debt. I mean, it's what they do. They don't really even have a mechanism, as I understand it. And the Treasury Department doesn't really have a way of paying the money. I mean, they might have a window where an individual could walk up and say, here's some Treasury bonds, I'd like to cash them out, and maybe that could happen. But I mean, institutionally, there's no real way for all these bonds to be cashed in, so they get rolled over. Well, if the Treasury Department sold these bonds at 1.6%, and now they have to roll them over at 2.6%, that's 1 percentage point higher. For every percentage point that the interest rate on Treasury bills goes up, the U.S. government, as I understand the number, it's $250 billion a year. They have to pay more in interest. So if they quit the tapering, the interest rates go up. They have to. I mean, it's like the law of gravity, basically. It has to happen. So as the interest rates go up, the government has to spend more and more money, I mean, a lot more money on interest. And so in the current budget, $250 billion more dollars the government has to spend. Well, if it goes and just borrows that $250 billion, it has to pay higher interest rates for that. If the interest rates are higher, so that's a problem. Or they could cut some spending. No, I'm kidding. I was just joking about that. Of course, they wouldn't cut spending, but theoretically, what does that mean? $250 billion less for EBT and other kind of entitlements. By the way, a stunning thing came out yesterday that I saw. You probably saw it too. 101 million Americans received nutritional support of some kind from the government. It could be from food stamps or school lunch programs or WIC where they get basically healthy foods paid for. So I'm not saying 101 million people get all their food from the federal government, but 101 million people get food aid of some kind. And a whole bunch of them, I want to say off the top of my head, 49 million get get food stamps. So the amazing part about that number, besides that it's 101 million, that's a big number, is that's more than there are private sector employees. There are more people getting food aid from the federal government than there are working in the private sector. You've reached the tipping point. That's when a republic fails, right there. And it happened last week. So, I mean, there are many signs of failure. But so you got all these people on all these government programs. Well, you cut all the food stamps to make up the $250 billion if the 10-year Treasury note yield goes up 1 percentage point. I mean, think of these hard choices. These aren't just economic hard choices. These are political hard choices. And so they can't quit tapering. They're addicted to it. The only reason the stock market looks somewhat decent to the untrained eye is because the federal government is buying, $85 billion a year, or pardon me, a month, $85 billion a month in Freddie and Fannie bonds, and Treasury notes and these other things. And by the way, I want to say last month, and this will be true of many of my figures, I get these things quickly, and I might be off a little bit, but they're essentially true. And if I say something completely wrong, you'll correct me, I'm sure. But I want to say last month, $85 billion came out of Treasury funds. There were non-renewals and that sort of thing, which is almost the exact amount of money that the Federal Reserve spent buying the same kinds of things. So normal people are not financing the federal government with debt. It appears that the Federal Reserve is pretty much the only entity that is willing to hold, U.S. bonds over and over again. I mean, so when people can get out of U.S. bonds, they are doing so, and that's not a good sign. So to answer your question, is how they know inflation's coming. They also know they cannot taper. They've painted themselves into this corner. What'll happen is something will force their hand. Maybe they'll try a massive amount of printing of money, quantitative easing, monetizing debt, whatever you want to call it. They'll try that, and finally there's going to be some, big moment when a bunch of people that normally buy Treasury debt are going to say, no mas, we're not doing this anymore, this is crazy. Of course, that's hard to do because everyone thinks, well, China will just say, we're just going to issue a press release and say, we, the Chinese central bank, are never buying any more American bonds because America's all messed up. And everything. Of course, China can't do that because that announcement would massively, reduce the value of the bonds that they already hold. So they can't just do that. But there's going to be some obvious thing that happens in which the value of the dollar goes down, and I don't mean, goes down 50% in 12 minutes. That's, I guess, possible, but, I can see this taking a few days or a week or 2 weeks, and, every day we hear on the news, today the index of, currency index, the dollar value went down 6%, over the past 24 hours. I can see that going on. So the Fed has absolutely messed this thing up, and I don't know many crack addicts. I don't know any crack addicts, but I suspect that they can't just go cold turkey. They either die, or, well, I guess they die. So I think that's what's going to happen to the U.S. economy.
Yeah, I think you're right. Things certainly have the potential to get bad. One way people can prepare is by reading Prepper fiction like the 299-day series. It helps to get the creative juices flowing about what to do and how to prep. And we'll have links to purchase the 17th Irregulars and all of Glen's books through Amazon by clicking the links at the bottom of the page. Glen, how can the folks find you? Are you on Facebook and you have a website?
Yeah, I have a website, 299days.com, so the number's 299days.com. And then the Facebook page, which is, I think, the best way to keep up on stuff and follow things. And we have cool contests, every 100 likes that we get to. I send 100th liker. I don't know if that's an English word, but I'm sure it will be after a while here with Facebook.
It is now, just like Glen Tate.
Yeah, Glen Tate, I'm going to like her. But the 100th liker, I send an autograph book to, which is really cool, which is a kick in the pants for me because I mean, I never thought anyone would read these books just because what are the odds that, I would just be a regular guy and write 10 books and they'd be really, really popular. I mean, that's unlikely. So I didn't expect it. But anyway, so I love doing stuff like signing things. But the Facebook page is 299 Days the Book, in parentheses, 299 Days, parentheses, the book. And that's the best way to follow us. And we have some Twitter, but with the character limitation, it's kind of hard to really impart too much information on Twitter. So, big fan of Facebook. And there's a list on the website of all the podcasts and interviews, and we've linked to them. I've probably done about 30 podcasts now, which are just, which are, I think, kind of interesting to listen to if you're interested in this topic. There's the first one I did with you, which is up there, which is a good one for people to listen to. So that's how people can get a hold of me.
All right, Glen, thanks for coming back on the show. It's always a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
An economic storm is headed our way. The die has been cast. We must spread the word and prepare. The coming collapse will bring a contest between tyranny and freedom. If the patriot is to prevail, we must stand as one, pledge allegiance to our God, and defend the Constitution. If you are new to prepping or would like to learn more, read our 7-step survival plan. You can find it under categories on the left-hand side of our website. Thanks for listening to the Prepper Recon Podcast. God bless, and happy prepping.